As we start, I gotta turn my microphone on. Can everybody hear me now? This is episode 11 of the Dominate Premed Show. Guys, I'm having fun doing this. You guys enjoying all this Dominate Premed Show? Me bringing you guys regular, high-level content to help you guys get into medical school? Well, today we're talking about once you get into medical school or you're trying to make the decision of which medical school you should choose, we are talking about how the change that just got announced today formally of step one going to pass-fail, how that plays into your decision-making and how it changes your prospects for residency based on where you are as a medical student. This is a big change, guys. A big, big change. It's going to have far-reaching implications. And today I'm going to break it down. I'm hoping to stay under an hour, but we'll see how it goes. But we have to get into this and really, really talk about it because people are going to be spouting opinions. And you guys don't want opinions, right? You want facts. You want objective. You want to know what's really mattering for your future. So let's get to it. Dominate Premed Show. If you guys are excited right now to get this information, make sure you guys like this video. Let's go, y'all. But stop making excuses. Stop whining. Stop, right? Get at it. No excuses. Just dominate. All right, guys, we are here. We are live action. Like I said, this is the Dominate Premed Show. It is all about getting you guys into medical school, bringing you guys specific and actual information to make you guys what? Independent, confident, and successful pre-meds. So let's go. I'm Dr. Pinesett, guys. Today, step one. Oh my gosh, it's changing. What does it mean? So many of you guys sent me messages, texts, all this stuff, and I've been preparing for this because the talks about this have been going on for a long time of changing the way board exams and licensing exams in medicine go because people are stressed out, because admissions is a wreck all over the place, and they're trying to create equity and they're trying to make changes to make medicine healthier because medicine is grossly sick. And this is the first major change that has been made. And there are more things coming down the pipe, guys, that you guys are going to be hearing about. There's going to be massive changes to medical training and medical curriculum. But this is change number one, and it's multi-level changes today. But the big one was that step one is going to pass-fail. So we're going to break it down today. And yes, IMG is going to be some changes, right, to DO. So let's talk about it. So this was first really seriously talked about in the summer. So since that time, I've been gathering information. I've been talking to deans. I've been talking to program directors for residencies, seeing what's going to shake out. So I'm going to bring that to you guys today. Okay. Zach says, listen to this man, killing it right now in medical school. Zach, first year medical student, killing it. And he won't have to worry about whether step one is pass fail because he's going to rock it. So there are multiple changes that were made official today that we're going to kick in at various time points. Let's review them. The first change is that they are now limiting the maximum amount of attempts, right, or total retakes of licensing exams. Previously, people were allowed to take 6 attempts at these step exams. Now they're saying only 4 attempts. And this will kick in January 2021. And I'll quickly break this down to get to the ones you guys care about. But this change was done to improve test security. Because as you guys have seen, you guys are some felonious criminal kind of cats. You guys will post anything and everything on a forum without regard to who owns that property, if it's copyrighted, and about integrity. Kid you not. Everything's on Reddit. Everything's on SDN. It's shameful that you guys post on this stuff. So USMLE has noticed that a lot of their exam stuff is showing up too precisely on these forums. And what they found by analyzing the data is that students who are retaking these tests, you're seeing similar questions, the same questions over and over again, so you're able to report it out better to these forums. They want to cut down on that. The other thing is they want to save money for all you guys. They want to reduce the test center burden by making it clear that you guys should be taking these tests seriously. And they've looked at the statistics, and people who retake and retake and retake licensing exams, the percentages of these people who are able to make, because you guys got to remember, there's step 1, step 2, step 3, any in-training exams for your intern year, for your residency. There are actual board licensing exams. So I'll just run around anesthesia. So I had to take step 1 after the first 2 years of medical school. I had to take step 2 CKCS 4th year of medical school. One is a written test. One is a clinical exam test. Maybe I should go into more detail. You guys want more detail on all these? Okay. Step 1 covers the first 2 years of basic science for medical school. That is a written test. It's long after the first 2 years. Step 2 CK, clinical knowledge, is the same thing as step 1, but is a clinically oriented test based on what you should have learned through your clerkships in medical school the 3rd and 4th year. Step 2 CS is your ability to talk to patients, be a human being and to carry out the actions of treating a patient that you've demonstrated on paper in person. So it's almost like a clinical skills interview, if you will. And that is taken again at the end of 4th year. Then after you finish that, you move on to your internship. Internship is either in medicine or surgery for the most part. These internships give you a year of broad breadth of training in order to be prepared to have a foundation for your subspecialty. In my case, I did a transitional year, which is like an internal medicine year where I do a lot of medicine in preparation for my anesthesia residency. At the end of your intern year, you take step 3, which says, does this person have a basic broad breadth of experience in medicine? Can they be clinically competent? It's a written test. Then you go on to your residency, in my case, anesthesia, and every single year of anesthesia training, there's 3 years, we take what's called an in-training exam. It is an exam you take to see how you're progressing relative to all your fellow residents across the country. You also take first year and third year ABA exams, anesthesia board exams or whatever. The basic exam is after the first year, then you take the advanced exam after the third year. And that advanced exam is your licensing to become an official board certified anesthesiologist. Whew, that was a lot. Did all that make sense? So there's lots of tests throughout your whole process. So looking at the data, people who fail a licensing exam and have to retake it, the more times they retake it, the percentage of those people who actually get through all the different testing levels to become board certified, if they had to retake it a bunch of times, is super low. So if you fail a licensing exam 2 times, the odds of you getting through all the steps is very unlikely. So they said, well, let's just cut that crap out and push them into another box. So that's what's happening. So security and then also that. So the first major change, if you guys are joining us, from 6 attempts per licensing exam to 4. The second change is that you must pass step 1 prior to taking step 2 CS. And where this kind of came into play was sometimes with IMGs, where they would take their international exams, do step 2 CS to show that they're clinically competent, and then wait and take step 1 when they have time to prepare specifically for that exam. And so now they're trying to say, listen, it makes sense if step 1 comes before 2, you should have to take step 1 before you take step 2. That's what happened. The third change that has everyone freaking out is that step 1 has gone from a 3 number, right? So 200 and something, 100 and something, to now being like a numeric exam like the MCAT. It has gone to being pass-fail. This will kick in at the earliest January 2022. So that means for the people who are entering medical school this year, you will be amongst the first cohort to go into this pass-fail step 1 exam. So for everyone who's already a medical student, if you're already in this kind of weird boat where you're already in there, you might miss this clip. But for those of you who are now entering medical school, you're going to understand that it's pass-fail. All right. With that being said, step 2 CK and step 2 CS, which you take 4th year, are staying as they currently are. Step 2 CS has always been pass-fail, the clinical skills. Can you talk to a patient or can you not, right? Pass or fail. Step 2 CK has always been numeric, just like step 1, and it is staying a numeric exam, so that is a graded exam. Whew. Have I laid it all out now? We got all the foundation out. Can I actually get to what it means? If you guys are still with me, let me know right now that you guys are ready to get the specifics. As I go into answering this question, whenever something like this is a major shakeup happens, people get very attached to their opinion. And so they're biased and looking for confirmation of their opinion. And so what's going to happen is that as people watch this, as people listen to this, people are going to be upset, some people, because of what I say. I feel because of that I have to preface what I say with my experience so you understand that I'm a legitimate source and I'm coming at this from as an objective of a place as you can come from and an experienced, seasoned place as possible. So let's run it down. The first thing is I was, right, a first generation student of color, disadvantaged college student, okay? I went to a public institution, not a private school. I scored at the top of the MCAT curve. I was a top scorer on the MCAT. Crushed it, dominated, as I say, with my How to Dominate the MCAT course, right? With that score and with my resume, I got into my top choice medical school, which is in the most competitive state in the country, California, and is actually the big dog in that state, which is Stanford. So I got into Stanford Medical School. I attended Stanford Medical School. I'm well respected there. I then went on to score in the top 5% of my medical school class at Stanford on step one. The top 5% at Stanford. So would you imagine the top 5% at Stanford is a high percentage or a low percentage, right? So I, again, dominated step one. So I have no issues with step one. Okay. I then went on and I got into my top choice anesthesia residency, right? It's a competitive specialty, anesthesia. And I got into a place that's in a competitive place, University of California, San Diego. It's in Southern California, so highly competitive. I got my top choice. I did well in residency, passed all my exams, and I got my top choice job at UCSD on faculty, clinical faculty at UCSD in the Department of Anesthesia. So does everybody understand, right? Wide breadth of lots of success, no bitterness, nothing. Tests are not a thing to me. I dominate everything because I know how to study, okay? With all that being said, a pass-fail step one change is problematic. I won't bury the lead. It's problematic. The reason this change has occurred is because medicine has reached a breaking point. Medical students are sick. Residents are sick. Attendings are sick. Our system is in it's shambles, right? We can't get insurance right. Our costs are booming. There's all kind of interest groups. It's a mess. And so they're trying to fix the sickness in medicine. And this is supposed to start tackling that. The reasons cited by the governing body who did this change were one, that they wanted to improve and ease the transition into medical education and remove the pressure. Why? Because first-year medical students are overwhelmed beyond belief because all of you guys as premeds justify all your average and your mediocre and you're just getting by academics. Then you get to medical school, which is a very intense and a very independent study-focused environment, and you don't have the skills. So you are overwhelmed and flustered and bewildered by medical school. So in order to ease that transition, right, because step one covers the non-clinical early years, by taking the burden of that step one score off, you can relax into medical school. We'll get there. I would say the better solution, right, is just to learn how to study before you get there, so it is smooth on yourself, but whatever. The second reason they wanted to do this was to remove the emphasis on step one in residency selection. Because if you guys are unaware, step one functions for residency placement like the MCAT does for medical school placement. So it's the equivalent of a medical school MCAT, if you will. So it's hugely important to admissions. And so what they were saying was that step one is based off the non-clinical years, and the data shows that your step one score doesn't translate to how good you are clinically. So wouldn't it make sense to remove the emphasis on a non-clinical test and move it onto a clinical test, which is step 2 CK, which, if you guys remember, will stay graded. Does everybody understand what I'm saying there? When it comes to residency admissions, step one is even more heavily weighted than the MCAT is for med school admissions. On multiple occasions, I've seen it happen where people will not talk to a medical student strictly because of their step one score. When you go to residency fairs, someone will approach a program director and say, hey, listen, I'm listening to your program. I want to hear more about it. And they'll say, wait, what's your step one score? Oh, well, my step one score is 210, which is low. 210. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Well, you have a great day. Nothing more for us to talk about. Keep walking. It's that important to residency admissions. Okay? Because of that, what has happened is that everyone focuses on the step one. And it is so heavily weighted in residency admissions that no one else really cares about anything else but step one. Which is why I'm always instructing my students to go into medical school, screw everything else that they're going to tell you to focus on. Focus on step one, because if you get that right, everything else fades away. When people were evaluating me for residencies, I knew I was going to get my top choice because my step one score was so ridiculously high that when I said it, people got weak in the knees. Oh, snap. What did you just say? And so, of course, Shannon, are you laughing? Shannon's in here right now. Say hi, Shannon.
Hi.
She's not. I told her. I'm like, you can stay in here and hang out, but you cannot laugh. And she's laughing. This is not a joke. This is serious. Okay. Oh my gosh. Anyway, so right, it's that serious of an exam. It's heavily, heavily weighted. So they want to take some of the emphasis off of that and make more well-rounded medical students. That's noble. I like that. Okay. They also, the last thing is that they wanted to level the playing field. So they felt that disadvantaged, underrepresented students were at a disadvantage for getting their residencies. They've noticed that these students, diversity students, disadvantaged students, tend to score lower on step one than their white counterparts. White students score the highest on step one. Just like, right, minorities and disadvantaged students score lower on the MCAT. So they're saying by devaluing step one, we create a more level playing field for disadvantaged and underrepresented students to be successful. Antonia says hi, Shannon.
Hello.
We were just talking about dinner. If you guys don't know, Antonia's restaurant, Samo Napoli in San Diego, has the bomb Italian food. We're coming back soon, okay? So let's break down really what's going on here. Is everybody following this so far? I know it's a lot of information, but this is important because all these details matter as we're going to talk about what it means for you and what you can strategically do to position yourself to get the residency you want. I say this is very important because what you guys and many pre-meds fail to recognize is getting into medical school. Everyone thinks, oh, I should get into medical school. And it's no. The biggest bottleneck is actually in residency. Medical schools keep expanding space. Lots of medical schools. I think it's up by like 25%, something close to that. Medical school spots are opening up all the time. New medical schools here, all the time. Residencies, they don't change. So you get into medical school, but there's a finite number of residency spots. So that's the bottleneck. So it highly matters the factors that go into residency, because how many of you guys have a specialty that you are interested in, that you would love to go in? The flip side of this, how many of you guys have a specialty you would hate to go into? You would hate to go, man, I would never want to catch babies. OBGYN, ugh. Well, if you don't have the proper resume as a medical student, you could end up spending your whole life practicing a specialty you don't love. That would be terrible, right? So anyway, if you look beyond all this stuff, the real reason that they're changing this step one and why this is the first change to quote unquote create wellness amongst medical students is because people are finally starting to realize what I've been spouting for forever, which is that the way preclinical medicine is taught in medical schools is too heavily focused on abstract facts in an attempt to create a curve amongst very smart, very hardworking, very driven people. If you guys imagine, right, the people who get into medical school are the most hardworking, most academically focused people around. So imagine how difficult it is to create a bell curve amongst medical students where you create some people who miss a whole bunch of questions. So in order to do that, what you have to do is get more and more and more and more abstract until you're talking about things that have no bearing on treating a patient. Just so you could make it impossible for someone to get all the points and create a spread. You guys know what I'm talking about? You guys ever been in a class like this in college where teachers write questions that are completely unfair in the interest of creating that curve? That's what USMLE test people have been doing, is creating these super abstract questions. So when you create abstract questions, it teaches students not to focus on what's high yield, what's important for treating patients. Instead, students start focusing on getting at tests, and consequently, they're not clinically ready. Does everybody understand what I'm saying right now? When I go out and I teach medical students, because medical schools invite me in to talk to their medical students about preparing for step one, about succeeding as a medical student, about getting into residency, I'm consistently aghast at the fact that people are using tools like Sketchy, are using other people's Anki decks, are using superficial study tools in the interest of getting at the abstract facts. And what they're doing is they're losing the concepts that matter. I can't tell you how many medical students couldn't tell me anything meaningful about physiology. If a patient were to go into heart failure, cardiac arrest right in front of them, they couldn't tell me a freaking thing what to do. But they can tell me all the advanced molecules of some obscure disease that you'll never see. It's problematic. So what's going to happen, you guys are going to see a lot of changes all throughout all levels of medical training, but one of the changes that's going to come very soon, I'm not sure when, is going to be, and it's already starting to happen slowly, is the de-emphasis of preclinical medical school, where schools are already shortening the first 2 years of medical school to less than 2 years. They're going to 15 months, 18 months, 20 months. Some schools have even gone to like 13 months, 14 months of preclinical medical school in the classroom, and then they start clinicals earlier, and they push step one back till after clinicals. Making step one pass fail opens up the floodgates, because now medical schools don't have to worry about preparing the student for step one. So you're going to see a lot of schools shortening the preclinical time in medical school even more. There are some schools, and I've talked to administrators who are talking about doing 8 months of preclinical medical school. And then you start clinicals, boom, right then. If you guys know anything about the difference between the American medical school training system or physician training system and the European system is what we're moving towards, which is more of, hey, less of this learning and more making people physician technicians. So saying, can you perform the job clinically, as opposed to building this huge fund of knowledge that may or may not be useful to you. So this is what this change is really doing. So they're selling it as wellness. I don't really buy it all. And I don't buy the diversity stuff. I'm going to break down why in a second. This is the real reason. Does everybody understand what I'm saying right now? Okay. Now that we've laid that out, here are the problems. Even though step one is going to pass fail, and everyone yells, hooray! We're not going to be evaluated on test scores. This is amazing. This is incredible. This is how it should always be. What you fail to realize, because you don't look through the details, is that step 2, CK, which is the clinical version of step 1, which you take in 4th year, is still graded. So what is going to happen in the short term is that schools are going to start relying heavier on step 2 CK. In my case, because my step 1 score was so high, I didn't study for step 2 at all. And I only took step 2 right before the match was due so that schools could see I had taken it, but none of the residencies actually saw my step 2 score. Because my step 1 score was so high, nobody would care. But now what's going to happen is that there's no step 1 score, so that step 2 CK is going to be the new step 1. So I can guarantee in the next 3 months, you're going to see all sorts of advertising for step 2 CK prep courses, prep classes, prep resources. You're going to see it. I called it here first. Everyone's going to be rolling out their step 2 CK prep, because step 2 will replace step 1. The problem with this, right, and this is a good thing because step 2 is a more clinically oriented test. That's phenomenal. I think that's great that that's the emphasis. The problem is one of the things that this organization was citing in terms of changing step 1 to pass fail was that there was a parallel curriculum that's been created in medical school. Medical school professors are paid to do research and to provide clinical care. They are not paid to teach. As a result, they are not good teachers, and they don't focus on really shaping a well-rounded, well-delivered curriculum. The teaching in medical school is worse than the teaching you get in your college institution. Guaranteed. I went to Stanford, and our curriculum, they had Stanford, again, innovators. Stanford's an amazing medical school. They actually had professors who were paid specifically for their teaching prowess. As a result, our curriculum was actually okay. I didn't partake in any of it. I didn't go to lectures. I don't believe in lecture. I believe in being an independent student and learning on my own. And that's what I teach my students. But if you want to go to lecture, it was there and it was better. Even still, it was not great, and all the medical students complain. I was like, man, you guys don't know how good you got it, because every other place is even worse. So, what has happened is the curriculum is poor in your medical school, so everyone goes out and does the parallel curriculum, which is buying the first aid books, buying Pathoma, buying Sketchy, buying Dr. Whoever's lectures for medical school. They do all these other things, and they kind of disregard the core medical school curriculum. And so it became this huge secondary, like, black market of med school related study resources for step one. So what they're arguing is that if we get rid of step one's, the emphasis on it, then people won't rush out and buy all this stuff, and instead they're going to engage in medical school curriculum. Well, the real issue is that your medical school curriculum sucks. You have to put resources and money and time and consideration into your medical school curriculum to make it worthwhile. Because what's going to happen is students now, knowing that step one doesn't matter, are still going to be buying all those other things, but now they're going to be paying less attention in your classes anyway. So you've actually devalued your preclinical years even more. Does everybody understand what I'm saying there? Like, we were trying to do one thing, but this is what's going to happen. People are just going to go get those resources more, and now it's going to be a step 2 CK market, because this is the other important factor. Step 1, there actually is a curriculum they could choose to partake of in medical school. The problem with step 2 is that clinical rotations, people don't care about teaching you. People care about providing care to patients. And if you happen to learn something as a medical student while you're there, that's an added bonus. But so because there's no formal curriculum, everyone already knows. People who study for step 2, study for shelf exams, they all buy the outside resources, right? Board review, right? All these things. So now that market is just going to balloon, and now it's going to become a parallel clinical curriculum. You guys understand what I'm saying? The other consequence of this is that now that step 2 CK is heavier weighted, right? It matters. What are medical schools going to do? What are med schools going to do? Many, if not most, medical schools make their clinical years pass-fail, or some derivation of pass-fail. High pass, pass, marginal pass, fail. That grade, if there is one, is based off some sort of weighted average of your shelf score, which is after every single block. So say you rotate through surgery. There's a national shelf exam for surgery. Your score on that exam gets some percentage weight. Then your evaluations, your clinical evaluations, get a certain weight. And based on those two things, they generate a grade for that clinical rotation. Does that make sense to everybody? So now if medical schools, if we know this, right, that those two things have some weighted percentage, if those two things weigh into your clinical grades, how do you think medical schools are going to change their weighting to reflect the fact that step 2 CK has now become so much more important? Let's go, guys. Come on, we are live. Light up the box. Let me know. I want you guys thinking about this. This is important. You guys have to be critical thinkers. You can't just believe what people throw at you. I want you to think about it. If you're a medical school and you create clinical grades that are split between their shelf score and their clinical evaluations, knowing that a test score is going to be more heavily weighted for residency, are you going to make the shelf exam or the clinical evaluations more heavily weighted? Which one will matter more? Exactly. The shelf exam score will matter more. What does that do to the clinical medical student experience? It makes medical students spend less time treating patients and trying to be a good contributor to the team, and changes their focus to what? Reading books, learning, getting ready, prep materials for the shelf exam. So now you have medical students whose focus is in the opposite place of where you want it to be. Additionally, if you now are a medical student, step 1 is after second year. And if you get a high step 1 score, then it really doesn't matter what else you do. So for me, third and fourth year medical school were chill time. I just relax, show up, take care of patients, learn as much as I want, whatever, and it was all good. But now, if I have to compete on a shelf exam that is graded numerically every 4 weeks, what does that do to my stress level third and fourth year medical school? Is it higher or is it lower? Cash App, we're going to get to how this affects IMGs. We haven't even got there yet, y'all. We are just cracking this shell open. This is point number freaking 1 of the problems here. We're going to get this. I'm telling you, we're going to break this down. This is a full, thorough breakdown. All the BS aside, we're going to get to it. Because there's a lot of things you guys have to understand about this. How will you feel as a third and fourth year medical student having to take a shelf exam every 4 weeks and it mattering? Right? You're going to be more stressed out. So in an attempt to make you less stressed out about step 1, they've just made you more stressed out about an exam every 4 weeks, coupled with an exam at the end of medical school. So now you're dreading an exam for 4 years as opposed to dreading it for 2 years. Ingrid says, I've been stressed about my step score since I started med school. Well, now that stress of 2 years goes to 4 years of stress. 4 years. It's tough, right? They didn't think about this and how that works. So the medical student focus has changed, and then also the school's weighted of clinical grades is going to change. Additionally, medical schools are going to recognize that, hey, wait a minute, we don't have step 1 anymore to have our students stand out. So what are they going to be tempted to do? Add grades to the clinical years. So schools that were traditionally pass-fail on clerkships are now going to have grades. Does everybody understand? They're going to have grades. And what do grades do? Stress you out. So all that pass-fail stuff you guys have enjoyed, it may go away. Okay? Let me look at my notes here. So step 2 will replace step 1. So it trivializes the first 2 years. It elongates the stress, and then the test will be more heavily weighted. Now, the second point. So for my IMGs, my DOs who are on here talking to me, asking about that. Because we're going to lose the major predictor of what program directors thought really mattered. And let me get the exact stats so I don't misquote it here. Of residency program directors were surveyed, 50% and asked to grade the importance to residency admission of various factors. 50% of program directors voted graduate of a highly regarded U.S. medical school higher than active involvement with research and quality of personal statement. Does that make sense, everybody? So program directors, already half of them are telling you the prestige of your medical school matters more than any research you've done and anything you could write in your personal statement. Already they say this. Step 1 score was the only thing that rivals school prestige. So in the past, you could overcome your lack of school prestige with an amazing step 1 score because it was in a uniform assessment point across all schools. Step 2 CK will become that, but because step 2 CK, so many students never studied for it because it didn't matter, there is no regulation of step 2, and program directors have never evaluated step 2, so they're not going to put their trust in that right away. So early on, what's going to happen is program directors are going to rely heavier on school reputation and prestige and what they know about that school and the medical students they produce. So what this does is it hurts. This is very important. Everyone pay attention here. It's going to hurt people who don't go to top medical schools. It's going to hurt DO medical students. It's going to hurt IMG students. It's going to hurt. And particularly why this is going to hurt IMGs is because step 2 CK is based off of what? American clinical practices. International clinical practices based on what's available, right? Because resources are different, equipment is different. Clinical treatments are different. Step 1 was based on basic science, which is pretty uniform. So if you're moving step 2 to be the focus point, you're putting IMGs at a disadvantage because they would have learned clinical training differently. That's why they already have a separate exam. Does that make sense to everybody? Do you guys understand what I'm saying right now? I am sweating. You guys know I'm sweating in here. Whew. I did some hot yoga this morning and I have not stopped sweating. Do you guys get what I'm saying right now? Do you guys understand? It's very important. Okay? Are you guys ready? DO students represent 25% of all United States medical students. So 1 in 4 medical students are from DO programs. Despite that, in a survey done, out of the 231 DO students who recently applied to neurosurgery residencies, 231, 4 were able to match into neurosurgery. Ortho. How many of you guys want to be orthos? 15 out of a possible 752 were able to match into ortho. That tells you that DOs are already discriminated against. DO's best shot of getting into these super competitive residencies was step 1. And even with that, those low numbers. Now you get rid of that and you add a kind of unfamiliar test. What's going to happen to these students? They're going to get squeezed. Right? Does that make sense? It's going to get squeezed. The other issue, right, for IMGs is the best way for an IMG to get a US residency is to crush the step 1 because US schools don't tend to trust the curriculum of an international school. They don't trust the curve because, and this is not to inflame anyone, the overall quality and preparedness of students at international medical schools is lower. Therefore, when you say I was the top of my class, it's not as well regarded. For my students who go to IMG, I was fine with it because all my students have taken my 5 pillars course. All my students know how to dominate and how to study well. So all my students are going to crush step 1. Meryl just sent me a message today who's at a Caribbean school and she's at the top of her class and she just got voted to the curriculum committee because she's a freaking baller. So she'll get the residency she wants. She's out of the window. But for future IMGs, this could be problematic. The only way around for people who go to smaller schools that are less prestigious, DO schools, or go IMG, you still have a route to get residencies. You do. But you have to be so much more strategic. It is now much more difficult. And what's going to be happening is that, like I said, these schools that were traditionally pass-fail, the lower tier schools, DO schools, they're going to go to grades as a way to really reflect their competency. They're going to be really tough about those grades. The other thing that's going to happen is that away rotations are going to become hugely important if you're going to have a shot of getting into certain residency programs. You're going to have to do away rotations. What's the problem with that? You say, oh, that's great. People are doing away rotations, get familiar with school. What's the problem with forcing students to do away rotations? This is going to be a nice segue. I like this. What's the problem with away rotations being something that medical students have to partake in? What's the problem with that? If you guys are learning right now, I know we're going a long time, but this is important. If you guys are learning right now, let me know you're learning. Like this video right now and let me know you are learning. Let me know I should keep sweating and keep going and give you guys information right now. You guys are mentioning it here. The problem is that away rotations, first and foremost, are very competitive. Already, people struggle to get the away rotations they want because they are competitive. Particularly, there are residency programs, and I talked to multiple program directors who let me know earlier this year that for away rotations, they won't even let students from certain schools rotate through because there's no way they're going to accept them as a resident. So why would they waste their time and their resources on having them for an away rotation if they have no shot of matching there? Particularly, one of the groups that's discriminated against are IMGs and DOs. So now you've taken away step one, and these IMGs and DOs are at a disadvantage for getting away rotations and getting the opportunity to show how great they are. Oops. So it's a problem. Does that make sense? The second thing is that away rotations are expensive. You have to be able to afford to go live and stay and take out more loans and all these kind of things. It's complicated because you have to work it out with your school, their school, all these things. Away rotations are stressful because you have 2 weeks to show them you're amazing. You know everything. You don't mess up at all. You got to impress for 2 weeks beyond your P's and Q's. You got to be staying long hours. So if your whole 4th year is comprised of away rotations, how awful is that? As we bring all these together, okay, this all leads me to the final thing in terms of this point of what the problem is that they talk about leveling the playing field. Okay? They said part of this is that minorities and disadvantaged students don't do well in step one, so by de-emphasizing it, we're going to create more opportunity. Let's start just at the medical school level from what I've already told you. If we are de-emphasizing step one, because we want to level the playing field because black students, minority students, disadvantaged students can't afford, quote unquote, the prep resources, right? Because they can't access the resources. How is it going to be easier for them to get away rotations? Afford away rotations? How are they going to, again, get the, if they couldn't get the resources for step one, how do they get the resources for step two? Right? And Zach just put in the box, 80% of urology matches were at home institution or their away rotation. That's how it goes. This is so important, guys. And it's so important. If you're trying to level the playing field, you got to ask yourself, well, how does this level the playing field? Oh, listen, they're not doing well in step one, so we're going to give it to step one and take them to step two. That'll help. No, it won't. Okay, well, if there's no test, we'll just rely on away rotations and how well they're known and whatever. They have done studies of unconscious bias. People who don't look like you, who aren't from your background, you don't like as much. So are we likely to see more or less disadvantaged and minority students into some of these programs? Less. 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 It's a problem. Additionally, if you're from a disadvantaged background, do you know doctors? Do you know program directors? Do you have people in your life who can make calls on your behalf to medical schools, to residencies? No. So then who does it serve that now we're going more on reputation and who you know for residency applications? Probably the people who are rich, wealthy, 5th generation doctors whose dad's on the board of whatever hospital. So it's going to promote, right, people who are already tied in, the already wealthy, the advantaged, and it's going to sink the disadvantaged. That's just at the medical school level. Worse is what it does to premeds. And anyone who looks at the data and understands, again, where the bottleneck is for minorities and for disadvantaged students, where's that bottleneck, guys? Why don't we have more doctors of color? Why don't we have more disadvantaged doctors than we do now? Where's the bottleneck? Is it getting into medical school? Is it getting into residency? Or is it becoming board certified? Where's the roadblock for minorities? This is so important. I want you guys to think about this. They have the statistics. They could have seen this. They probably considered this, and then I couldn't really get at it. How? Where is the bottleneck? Where do minorities stop? You guys are putting in the box, of course. It's medical school admissions. Minorities and disadvantaged students don't get into medical school. And what is the biggest reason they don't get into medical school? They get weeded out early on because they lack academic preparedness. They lack the resources, the support, and the guidance to navigate pre-med. The second reason is because of what? Low MCAT scores, inability to get the MCAT score. Do you guys understand? This is why I created an MCAT course that's $299, because my minority students, my disadvantaged students asked me to create an affordable course for them to teach them exactly how to dominate the MCAT. Right? This is exactly why I offer pre-med coaching with me for just a couple $100. This is why. Because my people, my minorities, my disadvantaged students don't have access to the resources. They don't get into medical school. It's the facts, it's the reality. So if you now have devalued step one and you've increased the value and what people are going to put on prestige of medical school, what now becomes more competitive? Getting into those prestigious, it matters more to get into those prestigious medical schools. Well, to get into the Stanfords like I got into, you need a top MCAT score. You need a top GPA. You need stellar extracurriculars. So you increase now, you took the burden off of step one, but you've added burden to pre-med where these students are the least prepared, where these students have the least amount of resources and infrastructure. You've increased the emphasis on what? The MCAT, which is the major roadblock, guys. The MCAT is the single biggest roadblock, guys, to increasing diversity as physicians. So if you take away step one and you're putting more emphasis on the MCAT. They talked about medical students from disadvantaged backgrounds not being able to afford step one prep resources, and that's why they don't do well. That's hogwash. Hogwash. It cost me, so this is very important. What's the average debt for a graduating medical student? This is why details matter. I'm going to break this down. This is very important. What is the average debt of a medical student who graduates right now? What is that number? Someone Google it right now. Pull it up on the box. This is so important. What's that average debt for a graduating medical student? Let's go, guys. Don't have me be the only one who's here thinking and doing stuff. Let's go. Light this up. Do you guys pay attention? It's around $200,000. However, sometimes a headline or a number doesn't tell the whole story. One of the things I was excited about for Stanford was that Stanford reports one of the lowest student graduation debt rates in the country. Yes, guys, I'm gonna get medical school to be affordable. Woo, I'm getting out of here like 140,000. That's the average. Woo, I can do it. The problem is, guys, the average debt for medical students doesn't take into the fact that becoming a doctor is a rich man's game. Most people who become doctors come from privileged backgrounds. This is facts. This is not opinion. This is facts. In fact, I was sitting down with a diversity dean at a medical school, even looking at their minorities. 80-something% of their minorities at this medical school, these are medical students, had parents who were doctors or lawyers. Do you guys hear what I'm saying? So when I'm always proud of my accomplishment as a truly disadvantaged minority person who got into Stanford Medical School, graduated taught my class, it's because I am the unicorn. Disadvantaged blacks don't get into medical school. Rich blacks do. The data supports it. It's not a lie. It's the truth. So because medical school and becoming a doctor is a rich man's game, the average debt is skewed. So even at a place like Stanford, out of a school, a class of 80-something students, I was shocked at just how many of my classmates had parents who covered their whole tuition. Cost of attendance for Stanford Med School is $100,000 a year. Their parents could write a check and chip that off. Guess how much my parents chipped off for my medical school education? Guess how much they chipped off for mine, just as a rough guess. Think they wrote a check for $400,000 on my first day? No. So that average is dragged down by the number of rich students whose parents contribute to their tuition. So the real number for students who come from disadvantaged backgrounds is way higher. So disadvantaged students graduate with proportionally higher debt ratios than wealthy students. Do you guys understand what I'm saying right now? So even though we read 200,000, if you're a disadvantaged student, you are likely, unless you get nice scholarships, many of my students get nice scholarships, you are going to graduate with higher debt than your wealthy counterparts. Does everybody understand what I'm saying? Regardless of all that, the point of that is that when we report an average debt of 200,000, let's be conservative and say disadvantaged students graduate with $250,000 of debt on average. How much do step one prep resources cost a medical student? I myself spent less than $1,000 on step one prep. I in fact spent less than $500 on step one prep. So if I'm paying the school $100,000 a year for school, do you think I even blinked at spending $500 on step one prep resources? Not at all. However, right, so the cost to me as a medical student relatively was nothing. Gave it away. That's pocket change. But for MCAT, if you're a disadvantaged student, the typical MCAT prep class that people think is required to get the top MCAT score, how much do those classes cost, guys? How much do they cost? How much is Princeton Review, Kaplan? How much are these classes? This is so important. How much is MCAT prep? How much? Again, we are live. I want you guys thinking. I want you guys evaluating critically your futures. Okay? It's around $2,000 for an MCAT prep class. Most of you guys don't pay $2,000 a year for tuition for your school. So when someone says to you $2,000 for an MCAT prep class, you're like, oh, whoa, that's my whole life savings for my whole life. I have to sell my organ to get that MCAT class. I can't access those kind of funds. So when you increase the emphasis on the MCAT, you actually worsen that burden, that gap, that disparity, because you guys as undergrads can't chip off $2,000 for an MCAT prep class. Which is, again, that's why I offer a $299 prep class, because I know you guys need it. Does this make sense? So people aren't thinking, right? The cost of money is different on what stage of your life you're in. If I'm paying Stanford $100,000 a year, I don't care about paying $500 for step one prep. But if my whole tuition for the year in undergrad is $10,000, chipping off $2,000 is a lot, right? This is important. This matters. They're not going to worsen. They're going to worsen the gap. You're not going to see more diversity. This is a bad move on so many levels. Do you guys understand? And here's the worst kicker of all this. Once a minority or a disadvantaged student is into medical school, there are a ton of resources. There's so much infrastructure. There's so much support to help that student find the resources, use the resources, get prepared for this stuff. In medical school, if you're struggling, they literally will sit someone down with you like every single day and have them work on stuff with you. In undergrad, how many of you guys who are disadvantaged or underrepresented, how many of you guys have someone like that in your corner who's going to teach you exactly what to get, what resources? Who has that? Does everybody understand what I'm saying? So what happens, and this is the example, and I always, I, I, I feel so terrible. People get on me about offering courses and coaching programs. But what you guys don't understand is that infrastructure and support, foundation, firmness of a curriculum matters. What happens to disadvantaged and underrepresented students is they disproportionately throw their preparation together. I'm just going to throw my pre-med dreams all in a bundle and hope for the best. The example of this, and I love SNMA, I love MAPS. I'm speaking at MAPS's AMEC National Conference in April. I'm the keynote for that. I spoke at a MAPS conference 2 weeks ago. I'm all about them. But I'm on Instagram, and on my Instagram it pops up that SNMA or MAPS or both of them, or one of them, is running a campaign asking, and I'm going to read the quote. They're asking students for recommendations for MCAT success. And they write underneath that, preferably students who scored higher than 500. So when SNMA or MAPS or both releases this guide to MCAT success that was crowdsourced from students who preferably scored higher than 500, and students of color and disadvantaged students consume this, are they at an advantage or a disadvantage to students who have formal infrastructure and training around them? This is so important. That's why I get on you guys about, oh, I'm gonna go to Instagram, and I'm gonna get some tips. I'm gonna go one video. I'm gonna go, how I got 99% on the MCAT. 5-minute video, teach you everything you need to know. Why am I so hard on that stuff? Because I'm about disadvantaged and underrepresented students, and a 5-minute video is not gonna all of a sudden turn you into an advantaged student. It's silliness. You have to have infrastructure. You have to have foundation. You have to have curriculum. You can't crowdsource an MCAT guide. It's silliness. I'm sorry, I get a little heated because like this is the ludicrous stuff that keeps diversity down. Ludicrousness. We're gonna create a free crowdsource guide. Me mentor, I love it. But again, you're gonna have mentors just being out. Anyone can teach a workshop. Anybody can mentor. No, you want people who are trained to be a mentor. You want people who are trained in medical admissions. People who are trained study experts. People who are you want training. You want high-level people talking to these students. We can't just have anybody up the street. Hey, you're interested? You're passionate? We can't do that. I can't be like, oh, okay, great. This policy on the surface sounds great. Someone in the box commented, what are the pros? The pros are that step 1 in preclinical stuff is devalue, which is great. Devaluing preclinical nonsense is phenomenal. The problem is it doesn't address the real issues if we're talking about increasing diversity and we're talking about medical students being less stressed and we're talking about taking the burden off of medical trainees from feeling so beat down they want to kill themselves. It doesn't fix the issue. I'm just like, it's lonely being the only voice in the room that's going to say this and be real about this and break this down this way, because you guys can hear a lot of people spin it a lot of different ways and whatever. This is the reality. We're not going to close the gap. It's like our U.S. as a whole. Middle class has eroded, and we have broke and we have super wealthy. Housing costs are rising much faster than living wages. Grocery prices rising, gas prices rising, everything's rising. Wages for the poor people, for the middle income class, leveled off. It's the same thing that's happening in medical training. And for all you students out there, recognize everything I say about step 1, none of it matters if you are what? Everything negative I said about step 1 and this change today, none of it matters if what? None of it matters if what, guys? This is the important thing. So what should you do? Oh my God, the sky is falling. When the sky is falling, I can't be successful. Oh yeah, this is, I'm gonna say one of the black students said at a conference that recently, it's the white fist of oppression on my neck, right? Like, how many of you guys feel crushed by this? People who are watching this who are DO students, who are considering DO, students who are IMG students considering IMG, students who are at lower tier schools. Oh my gosh, students who, how many of you guys are panicked right now? What changes that panic from, it doesn't really matter? Harpreet just said it. Study skills. Understanding medical school admissions, understanding how to navigate medical school and residency, being informed, but ultimately study skills. Because like I said at the outset of this, I fear no test. I fear no administrative changes. Because I'm so great, I can't be denied. I'm so great, it doesn't matter what policies you change, I'm so great on every front, I can't be stopped. So if you know how to study, your MCAT score will be good enough to get into a school you want to go to. If you're at a lower tier school or DO school or IMG school, you are going to go out and you're going to ball out in your preclinical classes. You're going to ball out in your clinicals. You're going to get great shelf scores. You're going to do well in Step 2 CK. You also are going to be out there getting the information you need to be informed about what residency admissions entails and loopholes for you to get the away rotations you want, for you to get the letter of recommendations you need to be able to get the residency spot you want. So Katie, one of my students who's about to start IMG, earlier was like, ooh, what do I have to do? That's your question. Hey, I just saw this. What do I have to do? That's the message. What do you have to do to be successful? And so I told her, I said, listen, don't worry, we'll get together. Come up with your plan. You'll be fine. That's what happens. But so many of you guys are out here watching 5-minute videos, watching a 15-second TikTok, thinking, oh, that's what I need to be great. Yay, sprinkles and gumdrops. Sprinkles and gumdrops. Step your game up. If medical school matters to you, if being a doctor matters to you, step your game up and become excellent. What does my shirt say? No freaking excuses, just dominate. We are dominators on this side of the table. It's the cult of greatness, y'all. If you are worried about your future, what are you doing right now to get great? Someone on here, Katie Shap said, as an IMG, I needed this. No, what you need is to take this and then turn it into you learning how to study by getting into my 5 pillars course. It takes you saying, listen, I'm going to grind this out. I'm going to network my tail off. I'm going to learn everything I can in this medical school to get all the recommendations, to get all the grades, to do everything I can to be successful. What are you actually doing? Watching me isn't going to change your future. I can yell, rah! It ain't going to change your future. What are you actually doing? I'm dead serious right now. Again, I'm not about the BS. If you are a person who wants to get excellent, make moves. Make moves. And I like this. Oren says, when you're the best at what you do, racism and sexism has to bow down to the best. Again, I fear nothing. People get on here and they spew racial slurs at me. I almost got attacked. It was a mob of people, a gaggle of people who basically verbally attacked me. We almost went to fisticuffs at a conference a couple weeks ago. People want to fight this man, want to test this man. But I'm so great, it doesn't faze me. Where are you guys at in your greatness scale? Step your game up, guys. I'm trying to tell you, you got this information, you recognize it's an uphill battle for some of you guys. Now, are you going to take the next step and go get your greatness? Are you going to go learn how to study, get into my 5 pillars course? I'll help you guys out. I'll put a link in the box below, give you guys a discount on it. But go get it. If you guys are now pre-med, you're understanding, oh wait, I got to get into a more prestigious medical school, or I got to get my test prep skills up so I'm ready, whatever's coming at me, get into an MCAT course. Do whatever it takes, right? Get into my total pre-med transformation coaching and mentoring program so I can mentor and coach you and get you where you want to go. Do these things. Make moves. Step your game up. As LaTanya said, step your game up. I can't enough with this. Please stop being average. Be so great that they can't ignore you. Open doors for your future. It's your doctor dream. Does it matter to you? Or are you going to be like, okay, great. You're going to give up? Or are you going to keep going through and justifying yourself, well, yeah, I'm not great, but it'll be all right. Can't get with it. Be great. Be great, or just go do something else. But this show is called what, guys? Dominate Premed. Why? Because if you dominate Premed, you get into medical school, you become a doctor, you get to help people, change people's lives. You get to make the impact you want to make. You get to live the life you've always dreamed of. All these videos you watch of doctors living the life you want to live, again, what are you doing to make yourself the one in the video? Yourself the one that's a doctor. It's your dream, but does it matter enough to you to get yourself great, to get yourself dominant? That's all I gotta say. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you have enjoyed this, please take a second, like the video. If this is your first time, I saw a bunch of guys, first time on here joining me. I'm live on here all the time. Subscribe, toggle the bell, turn on live notifications, get this information. Get greatness. And if you're really ready to level up, get to the website, guys, studenttransformation.com. Like I said, I'll put some discounts for you guys in the box below so you guys can get rolling and get your grade on, but step it up. I encourage all of you guys, make today the first day of the rest of your life, a great life, a successful life, a dominant life, y'all. Right? 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 I'm out of here, guys. Dr. Pinesett, the study doc. Thank you guys very much for joining me. I will see you guys next time. I'm out, y'all. Today is the day, guys. No more excuses, no more complaining. You're going to take your future in your own hands. You're going to dominate. You're going to be successful. Get to my website, studenttransformation.com. I challenge you. What are you going to do today to make your life better?